Hi, I'm Chris Coates. I was joined earlier today by Rivka Maizlish, a senior research analyst at the Southern Poverty Law Center in Alabama, to talk about our series on Confederate symbols in Virginia. Um, I'm interested, what do these have in common? Is there a common thread about the ones that are remaining?
In some ways, yes. I think we see them like at courthouses and also names of schools, which is particularly egregious, I think, because they're places that are supposed to be symbols of equality, like the law where everyone is supposed to be equal, or a school. And so there's a lot of those remaining. But, I think maybe there's a tendency to think that it's really artistically important statues of very well-known individuals that remain, but actually some of the remaining memorials are just names of parks or roads, or just sort of these a lot of these statues were sort of mass produced. A factory in Connecticut would just sort of make different statues of soldiers, and sometimes they'd get like a Confederate symbol slapped on them, and sometimes they would like get a Union Army outfit, and they'd be different. So we see some remaining that are grander statues of Robert E. Lee, and some that are just some mass produced statue of a soldier.
The your report last year said that Virginia removed the most in the country, most
Yeah.
icons. What does that say about this state and what's happening here? Does that indicate something?
Yeah, I mean, two things. I think it indicates that there's a lot of good organizing happening in Virginia. A lot of this happens when there's people on the ground really dedicated to saying this is not what we want our state or our community to be about. And I think actually it also speaks to the fact that Virginia has no preservation laws. There are dedicated activists all over the country who are trying to get rid of Confederate symbols in their state. But 7 states have these preservation laws that make it extremely hard um, and sort of illegal sometimes to change or alter any memorial that has been around for longer than a year, even. I think it speaks to activism and political will, but also to a state that so far doesn't have one of these really draconian, I think, sort of extreme laws about preservation.
Those rules limit local officials from removing monuments. And do you expect that to expand as we move forward, those types of rules, laws?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think there have been a lot of attempts to pass them in states that don't currently have them. Florida attempted to pass one that was even more extreme, that said something like you couldn't even alter with like a additional plaque adding context to anything that was put up before 2022 or something like that. So, yeah, I think that that's people who support these symbols of white supremacy are trying to keep them up, and they will use these laws to do that.
And that effort to provide context, one of the things we've heard in our reporting is that, you're trying to erase history when you're taking these monuments down. What do you say to that
Yeah.
criticism?
Yeah, I'm a historian, so I actually love to address the the claim that we are erasing history. The history of these memorials, is dark but fascinating, and I encourage people to look into it. These memorials were part of an organized, concerted propaganda campaign to erase history and change the meaning of the Civil War. Before and during the Civil War, Confederate leaders stated over and over again explicitly that they were fighting to defend slavery and white supremacy. You see this in speeches from the vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens. You see it in the Articles of Secession. You see it in the arguments that states made to other states saying, join us in the Confederate States of America, always saying they're fighting for slavery. Then after the war, they're embarrassed, and Confederate leaders change their tune and they say, oh, we were just fighting for some vague sense of honor. And so these memorials went up there to sort of rewrite what the Civil War was about and say this wasn't a struggle between freedom and slavery. It was just sort of honorable Americans, all Americans fighting, when really Confederates, of course, had committed treason against the United States. So memorializing them was an attempt to erase history, and removing the memorials or adding context to why they're there is a way of, bringing history into clarity, and the real meaning of the Civil War, which was between freedom and slavery, I think can be inspiring to people in the present. And I hope that that history shines through and inspires people.
What do you think is going to happen in the next 10 years with these types of monuments, these types of icons?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we will see more come down, and also we're seeing more creative projects of people using public art to memorialize things that their communities want to remember, and to tell stories that have sort of been erased. And so I think we'll see more creative ways of doing that.